Hi everyone, my name is Adam Searle and I've just finished a PhD in geography at the University of Cambridge. I'm about to start a postdoc in a few weeks at the University of Liège in Belgium. My research broadly examines the relations between humans, other species and technology. I'm particularly interested in the way different groups of people across cultural, linguistic and institutional frameworks make sense of biotic loss and recovery. And what I'm going to talk to you about today relates to my PhD project, which is all centered around the ghost of the animal you see here, the bucardo, or the Pyrenean ibex. I've just put on the screen here two papers which give a bit of context to the broader project, one from Environmental Humanities and one from the Transactions of the Institute of British Geographers. I'm not going to revisit these arguments here, but in short, they kind of tell a story of the bucardo and why I find it interesting. So the bucardo is the only extinct animal to have ever been brought back to life. The last individual died in 2000, but a few months earlier, scientists had trapped her, taken a biopsy and cryopreserved her skin cells. So when she died, the bucardo became the only extinct taxon to be outlasted by its own intact cells. 3 years later, in 2003, a team of scientists based at a laboratory in Zaragoza, northern Spain, created a clone using these cells, which was born to a surrogate mother goat via interspecific cloning, i.e. cloning to another species. So the bucardo interested me as it was a technological contestation of biotic loss. But what I sought to do with this project was to diffuse the spectacle of de-extinction away from what the ethicist Ronald Sandler refers to as technological wizardry, or taking seriously Carrie Fries and Claire Maris's call to make de-extinction mundane. I wanted to grasp at the everyday, subjective and lived experiences of biotic loss and tentative technological recovery. So this is where I went to spend 18 months conducting ethnographic research in the Central Pyrenees to think with the bucardo in using it as an example to understand biotic loss and recovery. What I'm going to focus on today draws upon qualitative research in El Museo del Bucardo, the Bucardo Museum, an exhibition space in the village of Torla, high in the Spanish Pyrenees. I draw upon ethnographic observation, interviews, and hanging out with a group of activists who founded the museum. I've pointed it out in the map here. So as you can see, Torla is the closest village to the Odessa National Park, where the last bucardo lived and died. So I'm going to get you to kind of imagine being stood here right now, which is in Torla. So during peak tourist season, the Pyrenean village of Torla is normally heaving with people who have come to visit one of Spain's oldest national parks, El Parque Nacional de Odessa y Monte Perdido, founded in 1918. If you arrive after dawn in summer, the first sight you will usually encounter is an orderly queue of tourists equipped for the day in the Odessa Valley, bordering a car park almost the size of the village itself. At least it boasts stunning views like this that you see here, with the Odessa Valley providing a wonderful backdrop, where decades ago one would have been able to glance at bucardo through a telescope. Due to Odessa's popularity, visitors are limited and cannot enter in their own vehicles. They can, however, catch a bus from outside the National Park's Visitors Centre. The waits here can be quite lengthy. Fortunately, there are things to do and see in the Visitors Centre to pass the time, including a permanent exhibition on the park's foundation. Modestly signposted in the centre's main exhibition space, on a placard, is an advert for El Museo del Bucardo. When I first arrived, I wasn't sure what to expect inside. After 6 months of preliminary archival work and interviews with some key figures in Aragon, the Spanish Comunidad Autónoma, which is like the state, where a significant portion of my fieldwork is based, the museum had come up quite often in my research many times. El Museo del Bucardo is a small square room, no larger than 30 meters squared. 3 of the walls are bordered by information boards and display items, with the other boasting beautiful panoramas of Torla and the Odessa Valley in the distance, which you can see actually here in the reflection of the perspex. These vast windows flood the room with natural light, and even in summer, indoors, the space has a certain freshness that one expects in high altitudes. As if looking through the windows, peering out to Odessa, the taxidermic remains of the last bucardo occupy the center of the room. Essentially, El Museo del Bucardo is a space dedicated to this individual, known locally as Lanya and internationally as Celia, where her remains are reworked into contemporary narratives concerning extinction, de-extinction, biotic loss, and biotic recovery. So when the last bucardo died in 2000, this animal was lost from the Pyrenees. Scientists tried to bring the bucardo back via cloning in 2003, yet their efforts were in vain. For 13 years, the bucardo was kept alive in Odessa only through the memory and stories of those in Torla. Lanya's remains were kept in a taxidermist studio in Zaragoza, unclaimed. No one was sure what to do with this, the rarity of an endling notwithstanding. the Bucardo's extinction and tentative de-extinction involved so many different interest groups, it was really unclear where the taxidermy should go. However, a group of local activists set out to do what they described as recovering the Bucardo's memory. In June 2011, a newsreader for Televisión España, local news service in Aragon, introduced the evening's headline story. Torla wants to recover the Bucardo's memory. Photographs of Bucardo moved across the screen, and video footage of Bucardo in captivity played in solemn slow motion, as you see on the slide here. The newsreader stated, quote, Torla wants to recover in a museum the memory of one of the most representative animals of these mountains. Torla wants to recover the memory of one of its symbols, the Bucardo. The animal disappeared in 2000, and since then scientists have had sufficient time to deeply study the characteristics which make it unique. Research work is ongoing, but alongside this, the inhabitants of Torla still have recent memories of the Bucardo skipping through the Odessa Canyon, end quote. And this really interested me as an ethnographic event at the interface of humans, non-humans, and technology. What might it mean, as the newsreader says, what might it mean to recover memory? As the work of Bella Jurgensen shows, museums are significant in their ability to institutionalize memory beyond the personal and anecdotal. To recover memory, though, implies something was lost, that during the 11 years between the Bucardo's extinction and this news broadcast, the Bucardo's memory was elsewhere. For Jurgensen, memory affects the understandings people have of their environments. Memory loss and memory recovery can profoundly influence environmental politics and recalibrate what she calls notions of longing and belonging. So what were the people of Torla longing for? The Asociación de Amigos del Bucardo, the Friends of the Bucardo Association, was the activist group set up by the people of Torla. And Torla is a really small village of around 150 people, so to have an activist group like this is quite significant. The group was founded alongside a group of local residents, but it was founded by local residents in order to, as one activist put it to me, campaign for Lania's return to Torla. Everyone in Torla is connected to the national park in some way. And by default, they're connected to the Bucardo. You know, people run hotels, people have restaurants, the whole industry and economy thrives off the national park. And the people of Torla have for centuries cared for the national park. The activists added to me that the Asociación de Amigos del Bucardo was completely necessary in order to bring the last Bucardo back to Torla. It allowed the village to come together mutually, which allowed the museum to happen. As a united force, the central Aragon government in Zaragoza couldn't say no to Torla. After 3 years of campaigning, on the 12th of April 2014, El Museo del Bucardo opened its doors to the public, with Lania as its crowning piece. So in the longer piece I've written on the museum, which is currently in review, I really delve into the specificities of the items and artifacts on show in the museum and explore the ways that these different items contribute to profoundly local or endemic extinction storytelling, particularly in the context of the globalizing narrative of biotechnology and de-extinction. In this presentation, I don't really have time to go into all this stuff in detail, but what I did want to focus on was the importance of Lania's return to Torla as an act of recovering memory for local activists. The arrival of Lania in Torla was heralded as a great success for the village. A resident of Torla told me that the people from all walks of life were there to welcome, as they put it, the Bucardo back home. Between 2003 and 2013, the Bucardo was being reimagined as a protagonist in the global de-extinction movement. Local memories of the animal were being lost to outsider, techno-scientific perspectives. For the people of Torla, the foundation of El Museo del Bucardo served as an institutionalization of collective memory, memories of their animal. An activist explained that from Torla's point of view, we were the ones who cared for the Bucardo for more than a century since the foundation of the national park. This animal cannot be anywhere else because it's our history. Another activist told me that there was another interest group present at the museum's inauguration, those involved in the cloning project. They have their interests, the activist told me, and they were involved in the museum's opening to promote the cloning. Although El Museo del Bucardo was founded initially by local people with aspirations to recover the Bucardo's memory, others were involved with different objectives. After all, a government official told me, Lania is the property of the Aragonese government, who were involved too in the cloning. The activists were of the opinion that the cloning was a means of putting Aragon on the map. Such framings relate to the popular media telling of the Bucardo's cloning story, which often gets swept up in hype, to which the scientific narrative is lost. This whole concept is discussed in Bill Adams' Progress in Human Geography piece on de-extinction. For example, a headline in El Diario, a national newspaper in Spain, reads, "Jurassic Park imagined it, Aragon did it." Modesto Sobrino Labon was the Minister of Agriculture and the Environment for the Aragon government between 2012 and 2015. He spoke at the museum's inauguration on the Bucado's uncertain futures, described in a local newspaper, El Diario de Alto Aragon, as a move looking for financial sources at the international level. So this is reimagining Bucado as a kind of talisman for technoscientific breakthrough through this space. For Sobrino Labon, the museum was an opportunity to recuperate memory and futures. Quote, we will try to recover not only the Bucado's history, but also the future of this species, that it returns again to life. It is a complex and ambitious project, but we can count on the cells of the last individual to try and achieve it, end quote. It's clear that for a certain subgroup of human actors, Bucado's futures are found in the speculative dreams of de-extinction. For these people, El Museo del Bucado serves as a site in which attention and interest can be generated. This also speaks to issues of biotic loss and recovery, albeit in a very different frame. For members of the Asociación de Amigos del Bucado, who were largely opposed to the cloning, though, recovery focused on memory and the cultivation of care for endemic wildlife. Often when we'd speak about the Bucado in the museum space, they'd then use the Bucado as a segue to discuss endemic flora, for example, in the valley. One of the activists told me that the Aragon government, who politicized the Bucado, don't recognize histories aside from the cloning. Of course, cloning is a part of its story, but it's a small part, tiny. El Museo del Bucado, for him, is a place to allow members of the public to move beyond the spectacle of de-extinction, moving beyond de-extinction's technological wizardry. It's quite telling that Lanya's biography, as told in the museum, makes no recourse to the cloning attempt. If scientists were able to successfully clone the Bucado and introduce them to the Pyrenees, a near impossible feat given that there is only genetic material available from one individual, and that doesn't obviously constitute a population. If this were to happen, a Museo del Bucado would take on very different meanings. It would speak to a lost Bucado that will never return. One activist put it succinctly, people around the world think of the Bucado and they think of cloning, but in the museum, people can learn the real story, its real story, which is a story of the Pyrenees. There, in a perspex case, peering out towards the Odessa Valley, Lanya will remain to tell that story. Around her, a range of narratives around biotic loss and recovery will continue to compete. The museum embraces the Bucado as an emblem of endemic nature, but also as an emblem of what it means to lose these diverse multi-species ways of life. So I believe that looking at the small-scale interventions in biotic loss and recovery and the recovery of memory, as I've done in this short presentation, is an important way to understand the complexities and multiplicities of extinction. When the Bucado story is used by people around the world to justify biotechnological intervention in the extinction crisis, for example, the synthesizing of elephants with hair that are supposed to resemble mammoths, or for reconstructing passenger pigeons or thylacines, when they do this, a spectacle is produced of the animal's extinction, which decontextualizes it from the everyday lived relations of people in the Pyrenees. Recovering memory for the people of Torla meant that the Bucado can continue to narrate the Pyrenean landscape beyond the guise of eco-modernism and technological fix. So yeah, that's my brief conclusion. I really look forward to discussing this with you in the panel and for watching all the other presentations in the conference. The whole thing looks great and I'm really grateful to be a part of it. So thank you all very much and look forward to hearing your feedback. Cheers.